Okay, I shall declare this meeting open with a civic prayer. Almighty God, we call upon you to grant your blessings upon this council, direct and guide its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and for the true well-being of the people of our area. Amen. So just as a matter of housekeeping, if you're all on mute, I think at the moment, but if you want to speak, perhaps just take yourself off mute or flick a note in the chat. That way I can come to you because I can't actually see everyone at the side at the moment here, nearly everyone if I scroll down. So perhaps pop a note in the chat if you need to speak, and then we'll go from there. So item 3, apologies, we have none. Item 4, conflict of interests. Are there any new conflicts of interest? No, there being none, we move on to item 5, confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting held 10th of March. Recommendation, do we have anyone willing to move those minutes?
Yeah, Mayor, I can do
it. So Councillor Sparks, seconded by Councillor Smith. All those in favour?
Yep.
That's carried. We'll then move on to 5.2, minutes of the special council meeting which were held on the 1st of April. Do you have anyone prepared to move those minutes? Councillor Martin, seconded by have I got a seconder there? Councillor Sparks. All those in favour?
Aye.
That's carried. Just before we continue, Matthew, is there anything we can do about the screen here? Because I haven't got a full visual of everybody at the one time.
So have you got the little side panel where you can see people?
Yeah.
Okay, so at the top of that, you should have the option to change that to thumbnail view or gallery.
Yeah, so I can do gallery view.
Yep, and then you should be able to expand that, drag the bottom of that down. You should be able to get all 10 videos in one.
I've just got to go up and down each time I see them.
You should be able to make it wider as well.
Oh, hang on. Rightio. Here we are. So I've got 1, 2, 3, wider. There we go. I have everyone. Thank you very much, and apologies for my lack of technical knowledge there. But
no, that's all right. I was just going to, next time you stop speaking, I was going to raise that anyway, because I think it's just going to be handy for you to see who's raising their hands and who's not.
Absolutely. Okay, so we continue on. Item number 6, business adjourned. There being none, no questions, no petitions, no motions or notice. So we move to item 10, mayoral elected members and general update. So just in terms of the mayoral report there, you can see that there's been a fair bit happening over the last few weeks. Certainly a lot of briefings through the LGA relating to the coronavirus situation, and I certainly commend both the team at council and also elected members for your adaptation to this new way of how things are working at the moment. It's certainly been challenging times, but I think that we're progressing through it as well as we possibly can. LGA have been really good in terms of the regular updates, and you can see there that I've been participating on a number of conference calls that have been with mayors and council staff from around the state. We've had the opportunity to have specific briefings with the Premier as well. I think I sent some follow-up notes from the last briefing session to you all just to get a bit of a heads up on the sorts of things that were being addressed. The great opportunity there is that whilst we're all on mute during these sessions, they actually give us the ability to send messages through the chat function, which are then questions that are then addressed through the briefing. So I feel that we've been really well supported in terms of having access to the decision makers and having the ability to actually flag specific concerns. So in between that, of course, we've had the Lucid Economics, the Economic Development and Tourism Strategy. And there was one other, Katrina, that I can email you separately, but the 9th of April, I attended via Zoom the COVID-19 rates and budget briefing, along with Eva was on that one as well. And on the 14th, which is today, we had a conference call with Tony Passon, and I think, Matthew, will that be touched on later in the agenda in terms of that item? Oh, you're muted.
Can do, yes. I gotta remember to unmute myself.
Yeah, so essentially it was relating to the childcare scenario, which obviously we had a special meeting on, and then the federal government introduced their scheme, essentially overrode our scheme, but we've had some communications with Tony directly about that, but I'll leave that for Matthew to expand on later in the agenda. And I think that's it, unless there were any questions of my mayoral report. Nope. Take that as a no. Someone willing to move that you receive my mayoral report? Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to the elected members' reports. And I will start with the top of the screen, Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Mayor Phillips. 17th of the 3rd, the COVID-19 briefing session. 31st of the 3rd, Lucid Economics meeting. 1st of April, special meeting with the childcare. 7th of April, COVID-19 economics stimulus. And today's briefing session.
Thank you. Katrina, do you need a few seconds to catch up there?
No, I can fill it in after.
Yep, okay. Thank you, Councillor Martin. We'll move on to
Who the hell have we got?
I was hoping for Daryl, actually.
Sorry, it muffled there. I didn't know who you was asking for. So,
Sorry, I was after you, Councillor Sparks.
Okay. Mayor Phillips, mine is the same as Councillor Martin, 17th of the 3rd COVID-19 informal meeting. 31st of the 3rd, Lucid Economics meeting. 1st of April, special, just a special meeting. The 7th of the 4th, COVID consultative group, COVID-19 consultative group. And 14th of the 4th, today's briefing session.
Thank you. Councillor Norman.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Phillips. So, Katrina, to keep all that sweet, just copy and paste Councillor Martin's. So, mainly because I've got it all on my OneNote on my iPad, but I can't go back and have a look at it. And I'm frantically making notes, remembering what I did, but it's the same as Simon's. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zetto.
Mine would be the same as Councillor Martin's, but I never attended the COVID-19 economic stimulus meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Mine would be the same as Councillor Martin, Councillor Sparks, but also That meeting on the 9th of the 4th, which with the LGA and setting budgets and whatnot, whatever it was called. And then, of course, the briefing session, which I don't know if that was on there. So. Oh.
Did you have any comments on the budget session, Councillor Smith?
I haven't got my notes, so I probably haven't. I don't think I stayed till the end actually, but it was a good thing to have. I think I did write some notes, but I can't think where they are about some of the things, particularly the case studies on the other couple of councils.
Yeah.
I know there's one thing that stuck in my mind, which actually makes a lot of sense, was trying to help the community by paying any accounts quickly and stuff like that. So, but yeah, off the top of my head, I can't remember anything else.
No, that's fine. I was really grateful that you were on that call as well, as was a number of our senior staff and also Rex, because certainly, you know, a lot of those factors are going to have to come into play when we're looking at our budget setting going forward. So it was a fairly heavy going session, and good to have a number of heads around the table at that one. So I'm sure that your notes will come in useful when we get to going through that process as well.
I'll better find them.
I'm sure you've got lots. Okay, thank you. Councillor Burdett. Are you there, Kevin?
Needs to unmute his microphone.
Oh, here he comes. And you need to unmute your microphone and your video, Kevin. Oh, no, that's muting. You've muted yourself.
I think Kevin might have minimised his.
Hang on, he's unmuted now. Kevin, can you hear us?
Yes.
We need to have your video on, please.
But how do I do that?
Up next to your mute button.
Start video, that'll do.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good.
Now, elect a member report.
Oh, I just did it. Oh, sorry, you weren't listening.
Well, you're on mute, so yes, you're going to have to do it again.
Read my lips. To the best of my recollection, I attended the meeting on the 17th, the council meeting, and today's informal meeting. I don't know about all those other meetings. I must have been asleep. I don't recall going to those meetings, and it's not in my diary, which is not in my hand.
Okay, I think Kevin was at the Lucid Economics, I think.
Yeah, got it. Who was presenting?
Is that via Zoom?
Yeah, that was via Zoom with Michael and Skarna from Lucid Economics.
I'm pretty sure you were on that one, Kevin.
Right, yeah, sounds good.
All right, thank you. So, someone like to move that receive the elected members' reports? Councillor Norman, seconded by Councillor Sparks. All those in favour?
Aye.
That's carried. We now move on to 10.3, the general update. We've got a number of upcoming dates scheduled there, reschedule of the audit committee meeting and also the long-term financial plan workshop to be rescheduled. But I'll pass over to Matthew to continue with the update.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Phillips. So as you can see, dates in there. Now, we do have a new date for the audit committee meeting, which I believe is the 21st of April at 10:30. So that would have gone out late this afternoon once we confirm that time. However, the other dates in there, we will confirm new dates for those, particularly the asset management, long-term financial management plan workshop. And then we'll also have some dates in there for some preliminary budget workshops as well, noting that the process for the budget may change depending on any allowances from the state government around budget setting this year. Just a quick update, COVID-19 update. There's some information in there in relation to, I guess, council operations. We've been keeping everyone abreast of the changes as much as possible. But I've just tried to summarise in that report in terms of changes to council operations. So just implementing the social distancing within the workforce. We've got Mallee Kids Childcare still operating, but with increased monitoring of health and safety, and no parents going into the centre. They're actually dropping off kids and collecting kids from the foyer, for example. And then consistent with other councils, all the playgrounds, Caravan Park and all other council buildings are closed for general usage at this point in time. The rubbish tip remains open, but just obviously with some enhanced social distancing measures up there to make sure that we're not exposing staff unduly. One of the other key things that we've been doing over the last few weeks is the outreach program. So at this point, Sophie Woodward, who's been in doing the calls, has made over 200 successful calls out to vulnerable members of the community in 2 stages. And that was initially about 3 weeks ago, and then a repeat of that process last week just to check in and see how people had transitioned to the changes imposed by restrictions by state and federal governments, because it's changing quite quickly. And the online survey, which we've had over 78 responses to the online survey, which is quite valuable information, which has been circulated to elected members previously. But that sort of information, that touch point, will continue over the next few months, and the survey in particular will repeat on a monthly basis. And that's going to give us as council a very good idea of what's going on in the community and what we may need to do to support the community that we don't usually do, and also give us some good foundations for forming council decision making on any particular responses. Something else we've implemented is the SMS alert system, which was set up for local businesses, for council staff, and for families of Mallee Kids, and we'll expand that into a community SMS alert system as well, which has been quite well received, along with the Facebook group for local businesses. In terms of community services, beyond council's control, there's obviously some pupil-free days at the end of term 1, and we still haven't had confirmation around how the school will operate in term 2. And you'd be aware of the closure of the acute and emergency sections of the Soldiers Memorial Hospital, which I'm assured by Adrian Pederick is a temporary measure as we deal with COVID-19. And the Karoonda Medical Centre, importantly, is operating as usual, but they're also operating with teleconsults, which they're now approved to do through Medicare as well. Retail and business, so most shops have been impacted either by closing voluntarily or by having restrictions placed on them in relation to their trading. And we're about to go through and just have some follow-up inspections in these premises that are still trading, just to make sure they're still abiding by food safety and handling as appropriate during this time. So we've still got an obligation to make sure people are trading effectively. I guess the one thing that Mayor Phillips alluded to is in relation to the childcare, and Council at the special meeting endorsed its own childcare measure to effectively reduce the gap fee for working families who needed to access care to stay in employment, but also to continue providing services to the community by up to 70%. And that was endorsed by Council on Thursday last week. Following that, on the Friday, the federal government announced the early childhood relief package as well, which we'll talk a little bit about. But effectively what that means is the federal government had looked at ways to support childcare providers across the country, and their approach to that was had 2 facets. The first was by simplifying childcare subsidy and fee paying arrangements that exist at the moment into one simple payment per week, direct from the government to childcare agencies. And then the second component of that was looking at partnering up childcare providers with the JobKeeper program, so that they had the $1,500 per employee coming into the business as well. So that unfortunately doesn't fit all childcare services, and it certainly doesn't fit Mallee Kids because local government and a lot of other businesses aren't eligible for the JobKeeper payments. So what that effectively means is the measures that the government has put in place to support childcare services and childcare operators through this time only has half the impact that it's intended to have on a number of operators, and Mallee Kids being one of those operators. So as Mayor Phillips alluded to, we've written to Tony Pazin as the federal MP responsible for our region late last week, and had a follow-up phone call today with Tony Pazin in relation to, I guess, the impact of the early childhood education package that was released. And Tony Pazin's also advised us he's had discussions locally with the State Minister for Education, John Gardner, and also with the local government association about what support could be offered from the state. And I guess the case reference there is New South Wales, which apparently a large portion of childcare centres in New South Wales are actually operated by local government. And the state government in New South Wales has announced its own relief package for childcare operators on top of the federal package. So that is something else that we're now pursuing locally with the state, with the assistance of Tony Pazin in that regard. So while it has had an impact on the income for Mallee Kids, it's certainly something that we're looking to ameliorate somewhat in the coming weeks, and understand how we can eliminate that. But in a real sense, income has been reduced to literally half of what it was 2 weeks ago by the new changes that have been implemented by the federal government. And at the same time, what we've seen is that because of school holidays, because of the closures to the school in the lead up to the school holidays, numbers in the centre are actually at capacity. So this week we're at 14, 15 kids. Next week we're at 14 and 15 kids. We're licensed for 15 children, and we've still got children who are listed as vacancies in there as well. So while we've seen the income half under this arrangement, we've seen the numbers of children effectively double. So we're just monitoring that situation and working through that best we can. Just continuing on through the general update, business and annual plan timelines. As Mayor Phillips alluded to, there was a meeting hosted by the LGA last week just to talk about council budgeting processes. So both federal and state governments have effectively deferred their budgeting processes this year, given the current situation and the need for them to spend on stimulus projects. And I think it's fair to say that there is a call from the state government to local government to call on their balance sheets to spend on stimulus projects. But I guess we also have to be mindful of the fact that we've got obligations under the legislation and to our community to not spend beyond our means, and also to do that in a sustainable way. So the workshop was a discussion by the LGA, and I think there was about 150 attendees at that workshop from councils all across the state, just talking about what some councils were considering doing. And I believe that there'll be some announcements in the coming weeks from the Minister for Local Government in relation to potentially some exemptions for councils in relation to timelines for budget setting this year round as we go through that process. So definitely something we'll discuss further once we get into budget workshops. But I think one thing that was clear from that is that there's not one size that fits all, and there's a cookie cutter approach is not going to work. And while some councils are looking at broad rate relief, many councils aren't. They're looking at more targeted ways to support their local economies over the next few months. Carina Football Club extension update. That building is nearing practical completion. So just waiting on a few minor fittings, and then I think there's also just waiting on the communication with Bowhill Engineering and Andy's building around the portico installation on that building. But other than that, it is pretty much at handover stage. So we expect to see handover within the next couple of weeks, and that project wrapped up. And we've got the silo art, which is continuing on. That's rotating. The 12-month calendar of artworks is set. So we've just got to check It's just been reported back to us today that there may be some issues with the time zone adjustments with daylight savings. So I've just got to check that out and make sure that's all functioning correctly. And we'll also have some provision for community meetings to be held via video conferencing as well. So what we're using at the moment, Zoom, the intention is that we can then make that available for community groups to use so that we can actually start facilitating our community groups continuing on with their meetings and their business during this time as well. And just a couple of items. So curbside collection tender. So I guess just looking at the item we discussed recently, which was around curbside collection of waste. So Jared's just working through that at the moment for the tender documents. So that'll go out within the next few weeks, and that will look at options for waste and recycling collection. And then we'll be able to use that to make some decisions on whether we go with a new provider, whether we stay with the existing provider, and I guess all the cost implications of that, and whether there are cost-effective options to increase the service delivery in that regard. And just Pest and Weeds project has been ticking along in the background. And the team have been across all 3 council districts, which is Corinda, East Murray, Southern Mallee, and also up into Loxton, Waikerie. And I think we're at the point now where we're probably going to be seeking either an extension of time for that project, just so that we can, due to some of the delays we had late last year, just so we can extend that program into sort of July and August, or potentially increase the resourcing on that. But we've got a reasonable portion of allocation left in that budget to see that project through. So yeah, so just a few items that have sort of been happening in the background, and happy to have any questions on any of those.
Any questions for Matthew?
Probably not one for Matthew, but Russell might be able to ask a puncher. What's that in the Loxton area? The Pest and Weeds guys are chasing.
Prickly pears.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So Punty is a family name, prickly pears a species. So there's about, I don't know, 22 different species of them. But yep, in a short word, prickly pear.
No worries. Thank you.
Any other questions for Matthew or anyone else relating to the update? Councillor Burdett?
No question.
Oh, see, you're not muted, and I just, you haven't been muted, so I thought you were unmuting, but you're not, so that's fine.
I don't know what I am. I'm just talking to you and you're hearing.
Excellent.
I'll mute Councillor Burdett for the moment then, shall I?
Yes. Okay.
All right, so there should be a recommendation in there to just note that report. So
yes, so can someone move, or someone prepared to move that we note that report? Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Smith. All those in favour? That's carried. We'll move on to 11, items from committees and subsidiaries. So we've got the minutes from the Corinda Historical Society meeting on the 18th and also the 17th of March. Sorry, 18th of February and 17th of March, 2 separate minutes. And then we've also got minutes from the Wanaka Recreation Committee AGM. So is anyone prepared to move, firstly, the Corinda Historical Society, 11.1.1?
Move them all together, Caroline.
Oh, can I? Okay, are you prepared to move both of those, Councillor Zetto? Yep, seconded by, I think it was Councillor Sparks, was it? Yep. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to 12, items for noting, the annual business plan progress report. Matthew, would you like to speak to anything here?
Just to note that as we've entered the last quarter, the reporting has changed slightly. So we've removed the columns for quarter 1 through to quarter 4, and we're simply now referring to whether or not the projects are expected to be completed by the 30th of June or not. Other than that, we've highlighted any of the sort of the key updates in there in red text, just to make that easy for the elected members to see. Other than going through the whole report, we'll probably just ask for questions if there's any questions on any particular items.
Thank you. Do members have any queries relating to the progress report? Noting that it's difficult to look at it quickly there. Thank you. Katrina's scrolling through it slowly for everybody, just to refresh your memories. No questions? Oh. The recommendation there that we note the progress report. Just at the top here, council note the 1920 annual business report for April. Do I have a mover? Councillor Norman, seconded by Councillor Zaddo. All those in favour? It's carried. Okay, down to item 12.2, capital projects progress report. And is this one for Jared to speak to?
Yep, can do. So just same format, so same changes have been made to the layout of the document. Quarters 1 through to quarter 4 have been removed, and then we're now just talking about projects in the context of heading towards 30th of June when you're looking at the table. And I guess the only thing I'll just note there is the first project in the list is the Corinda pool, Corinda Area School pool. Latest advice I've had as of late last week was that the tender is now closed and it should be assessed within the next 2 weeks. So we should have an outcome on that pending. Jared, if you want to talk to anything, you can talk to anything. Otherwise, we can just open up for questions.
Hang on a minute, Jared. Sorry, Matthew, you just froze up there for a minute. So you said the tender is now closed and we expect an outcome in 2 weeks for the pool?
My understanding is it's under assessment, and I would expect that we should hear more within the next 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Jared, over to you.
No, that's all right. Yeah, I didn't have too much more to add other than just to say that Walker Flat Road is now 100% complete, so all the signage is up and that's all finished as a project. And Goondilu Road is also finished as a project as well. So we feel we've got some good results on both of those roads, and the guys are pretty proud of how they've turned out. So it's a good result all round, but really that's all I had to add from that side of things.
Thank you. Do you have any questions to Jared on the Capital Works Progress Report? Councillor Sparks?
Yeah, through you, Mayor, to Jared. I've had numerous questions from the public as to why we are still mowing the lawn in front of the shuffle screens with a push mower or hand mower. Why aren't we using that? Why aren't we using one of the ground mowers like the do the oval?
Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose it's a personal preference situation. So you'll sort of see Henry and Brownie very occasionally will mow that lawn, and they do use the normal oval mower. I suppose Simon's output from a manual labour perspective is pretty high, so I suppose he's comfortable sort of smashing it out with the hand mower. But yeah, I'm happy to take direction on that and direct Simon alternative means of mowing the lawn. But I think as I said before, I think his output from a manual handling perspective is pretty strong. So he does it in a time effective way. So I've been happy with that and happy to let that go.
Yeah, thank you for that. But I just, it'd be much quicker on a ride-on mower than the push mower or the walk-behind mower, I would have thought. Is there an issue with the catching of the grass, or is it that there's no other issue other than just preference?
Well, probably, I guess the oval mower we found was causing a fair bit of thatch in the grass on the oval. So that's a good point. There probably is that as a slight issue. That's why we, on the oval, have jumped to using the school mower, just because that gives a much better result from that perspective. And gradually we're actually able to take all the thatch and rubbish underneath the surface there out of the grass. So that could potentially be an issue there too, up in the main street. I'd probably have to get some more information on it from Simon and Henry and get their thoughts.
Thanks, Jared. Any other questions on the capital projects report?
Just one from Councillor Zotto. Mayor Phillips, will we resume to road construction type activities in the short term? We're not going to throw the 3 blokes out in the graders and grade the road 7 times before Christmas, are we?
Through you, Mayor Phillips,
Jared?
I'll take that one if you like, because that was my directive to cease that project. So I guess that's a little bit of an unknown at this point. So from a BCP or business continuity perspective, what we've done is tried to simplify our operations as much as possible, knowing that, you know, we're going into an unknown period where we could have quite a high rate of absences, and basically the complexity then of having, you know, contractors out on site and work crew out on site. If you've got absences, you know, could cause us undue headaches that we probably don't need at this point in time, as well as creating the social distancing within the team. So that's sort of one that we're sort of playing probably week by week. And I think, you know, if things go according to plan, that we could start reviewing those projects again within the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Yep.
But at this point, we're using that as an opportunity to catch up on patrol grading and some of these other areas as well.
Yep. Yeah, it's a day by day type scenario, isn't it? Things change every day. So.
Yeah, through you, Mayor.
Oh, yes, Councillor Sparks.
Yeah, I just noting, or just letting other members know that there's Mid Murray Council is an example that they're working alongside where I work. Excuse me, and they are still building roads. They get a dual cab truck, which is they can put 2 people in, and then they drive another truck home, and yeah, it's all a bit laborious because they got to stay the social distancing, but they are still building roads.
Yeah, I think, you know, look, it's every business needs to make decisions based on, you know, size of their crew, all sorts of different elements there, and certainly, you know, staff have been reviewing it regularly and will continue to ensure that you know, we can get back to that business as soon as possible. But as you'd appreciate, there's a lot of different factors at play there.
Yeah, sorry, that's a 4-man crew that they're using.
Sorry?
That's a 4-man crew that they're using.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so no other questions then to Jared. Someone willing to move that we note the Capital Works Progress Report? Councillor Sparks, seconded by Councillor Zotto. All those in favour? That's carried. Okay, we're now at item 13.1, which is the confidential item, and it was remiss of me at the start of the meeting to flag that I wish to move this to the end of the agenda. Given it's the only confidential item, it makes sense for us to deal with all of the other business before we actually move into confidence for that matter. So we will move straight into 13.2, which is the closure of the principal office and other legislative changes. So this is all to do with changes that have been required as a result of the COVID-19 situation and our obligations with the Act. So I'll just pass over to Matthew just to give an overview of that and what we need to do here.
Thank you, Mayor Phillips. So again, the Minister has been granted, the Minister for Local Government has been granted powers as the state is in a declared major emergency, and he's using those powers to incrementally make changes or substitute portions or revoke portions of a Local Government Act to facilitate council business. So I guess the first notice, and these will come every week, every 2 weeks, however often he needs to make those changes. The first one was the notice that was published a week and a half ago, which was around having electronic meetings, which is why we're able to have the meeting that we're having at the moment. And the second notice that he's published was on the 8th of April, which was Wednesday last week, which was in relation to closure of council's principal offices and still being able to make documents available for inspection and councils being able to conduct their business. So I suspect that there will be more notices, and I suspect later this week or early next week, there'll be notices published in relation to budget timelines and processes, and we'll just deal with each one as they come up. This one in particular is that to do with the wording in the Local Government Act. So as it stands in the Local Government Act, there's two different legal opinions as to whether or not a council can close or vary its hours for its principal office without going through consultation. And the advice provided through the LGA was that the only way to close a council office legally prior to this notice was to issue a public health notice on the council office. However, other advice had been received to say that, you know, given the current situation, it would be highly unlikely that anyone would take matter to that. But we closed the office. So I closed the office in accordance with the advice provided by the LGA and their legal advisors, which was to issue a public health notice on the office under the Public Health Act. However, we now have the provision to close the office under the Local Government Act under the permission and the power granted by the Minister, which means that we now no longer need to issue a public health notice on the council to close the office. And I guess the recommendation is that council enact the power provided by the Minister in the notice last week and temporarily close the principal office of council and hereby, I guess, allow me to remove the public health notice from the council office. And then that the principal office of council remains closed until such time that it's deemed appropriate and safe to reopen, as determined by myself in consultation with the Mayor or as otherwise resolved by council. Now, the one thing I should just note on these notices provided by the Minister, they're only in effect, unless he stipulates a time frame on those variations, they're only in effect for the period that the state is in a major emergency and 28 days after that major emergency declaration is removed. So these provisions are all effectively temporary provisions. However, I suspect that some of these changes may make their way into the legislation permanently down the track as well. But effectively, all we're doing is responding to the notice from the Minister from Wednesday last week and council exercising that power to close the office temporarily and then basically enable me to remove the public health notice from the office.
Thank you. Do we have any questions relating to that? Nope. Are we able to move them together, Matthew?
Yeah.
So do I have anyone willing to move 13.2.1 and 13.2.2? Councillor Sparks, seconded by Councillor Smith. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We'll then move on to correspondence, 14.1. I've got to jump down. So we've got a couple of items here from the Lego lads. Are you with me, Katrina? Getting there. Okay, so it's a message that's been sent to us from some of the students at the school relating to footpaths. They're concerned with the safety and condition of the footpaths, and they've surveyed some students from around the school, seen that 83% of them ride or walk around the town. 83% of them that ride or walk around the town go on the road because of the quality of the footpaths. They've given some indication of where the issues are. So basically drawing it to our attention. So suggested action for that one, Matthew, I believe, is to place that under consideration when we're looking at the...
Yeah, so I think probably in relation to this correspondence and the correspondence from the Corinna Farm Fair would be to take both on notice with some further information to be brought back, first in relation to footpaths, but then from Farm Fair letter, which is following this in relation to the apple trees down at Pioneer Park, to be brought back to a future meeting of council. But the footpath issue in particular is something we can discuss in detail at the asset management workshop when we finalise the roads information, because it will require a bit more of a longer term strategy in terms of what we would want to do in terms of footpath maintenance, noting that it has been a bit of an issue for some years.
Thank you. So just to clarify there, it was the Farm Fair letter was relating to the trees at Apex Park, not Pioneer Park. So I've just got some noting there with regard to also the pergola. So assuming there's no other questions on that correspondence, can I ask that someone moves that the correspondence is received? Councillor Norman, seconded by Councillor Zetto. Is that you waving? Yes. Did you get that, Katrina? Norman and Zetto. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. We'll now move back to item 13, the confidential item. And now I'll need to ask someone to move a motion that we move into confidence. And here are the official motions that we need to move. Now I've lost my place as well. 13.1.1, 13.1.2 and 13.1.3. Anyone prepared to move all of those? Councillor Sparks, seconded by Councillor Burdett. All those in favour? That's carried.
Okay, so just noting here for the purposes of the recording that the last item on the agenda is now being discussed and council is moving into confidence, and the recording will be stopped at this point in time, 8:22 p.m.
Thank you.